When I got back to Fort Monmouth from Dad's funeral, I found out that they'd rebooked me to do the 28th week. Of course, this is a month later. And of course, the Mark IV class that I had thought I was going to attend, I had been dropped out of. So I did the one more week of microwave ready repair, and then I was moved to casual status. Now, casual status means that you're sitting around the barracks, you're waiting for orders, if they need somebody to do some work around the barracks, they call on you. So I had a lot of time, but I was waiting for orders, and not too long, I got alerts for Germany. Now, we had a formation at about 3 o'clock every afternoon, and they would give us an update on what things were, who signed what details, etc., and they would also read off to us and hand us alerts or orders that we got. The way the military worked back then, anyway, was that they would send an alert out saying you're going to get orders for this particular place, Vietnam, Germany, wherever, and then you would have 30 days to get your business in order. You got to take care of your bank accounts, arrange automatic payments for any payments you have. You have to be, at the end of that 30 days, you're supposed to be all set up, ready to go overseas and not need to be home. Sell your car if you need to, whatever. So anyway, we're there in formation, and the sergeant who was presiding over the formation told me I had alerts for Germany. And then Carl, the guy standing next to me, he informed him that he had alerts for Vietnam. Carl objected. He said, I can't accept these alerts. And he said, my brother is in Vietnam and I'm the only son left besides him, so I can't go to Vietnam. I can't be sent to Vietnam. It's not legal. And the sergeant looked at him and said, this is the Army. I am telling you, orders are coming for you to go to Vietnam. If you don't go down to headquarters and get it changed or stop those orders, they will come and you will obey them. Is that clear? Yes, Sergeant, Carl responded. And so after the formation, Carl turned to me and said, Bob, would you go to headquarters with me? I said, sure. Now, that was very surprising to me because Carl hated me. He had made it quite clear he thought I was a religious fanatic, and he was totally opposed, and he just couldn't stand being near me, being even in the same company as me. And so here he was. In his time of crisis, who did he turn to? He turned to me. And he was in crisis. That's why I said yes. I said yes because he needed support. And so, of course, he turned to me. So we went down to headquarters. Now, you remember, Uncle Earl told me I should be able to get a dependency, might be able to get a dependency hardship discharge. But I had no clue how to even try to get one. Well, when we walked into headquarters, I walked in, and as soon as we got into the big office area with a bunch of desks, there was a sign over one of the desks that said, hardship dependency discharge is here. And I went, oh, Carl, I'll catch up with you. And I sat down right there. And I started talking to the clerk that was there at that desk, and I told him my situation and that I wanted to know about if I could get a hardship dependency discharge. So he laid out for me all the stuff that has to be true. You have to have the situation that is urgent, that you're needed for, has to last at least 2 years. It can't be a short-term thing. It has to last for at least 2 years. And if it lasts less than 2 years, you can be reactivated into the military. Furthermore, there has to be no other possible solution. And it has to be a situation where they can't get by without you. So he went through all the criteria, and he handed me a bunch of printouts and paperwork, forms to be filled out, and gave it to me and said, you got to get all these filled out. They have to be notarized so that we know that the person who signed it is the person that supposedly wrote it. And so I got all that information, got back with Carl, we went back to the company, and I called my mother and told her about it, and told her I was sending her a package, be looking for it, with all the forms and the instructions for applying for hardship dependency discharge. So I sent all that stuff to my mom, and went about my, and I don't know, 3-4 days later she got it. She sent me a letter, and she was talking in the letter about how hard it is for her being without Dad and trying to take care of Sherry and Kenny on her own, how desperately she needs me there. And she was asking me to pray for her as she goes through these hard times. And of course I prayed for her. But you know, as I was thinking about her and her situation, and you know, I started feeling blue myself. I was kind of feeling like I really missed Dad. I really missed I missed him being there, and being able to count on him being there for Mom and for me and for everybody else. And of course I had free time. Like I said, I'm casual status, so I didn't have a detail, so I went to the chapel one afternoon, and I'm sitting there in the chapel praying, and I just reached out and took the Bible out from under the pew in front of me. And I don't recommend this, and I hardly ever do it, but I just let the Bible fall open. I just kind of held it, and you know, if you hold it, and it just kind of, the pages gradually separate, and it will open to some random page in the Bible, and I just let that happen. Well, the page that it opened to was John chapter 14. And so I started reading at John chapter 14. And I don't always, or matter of fact, I seldom read out loud, but for some reason on that day, in that private place, in that chapel with nobody in it, I started reading John chapter 14 out loud. I read John 14 through 17. And as I read that passage, God healed my heart. I was no longer grieving for Dad. He wasn't dead. He went home. You know, Jesus talks about this life is not the end. Not for a Christian. This life is just the beginning. It's the testing ground. The real end, the real life is ever after. Everlasting life. And any Christian who's born again, Jesus says, has everlasting life. Not when they die, but when the minute they receive Christ, they have everlasting life. So I came away from that chapel convinced, confident that my dad's not gone. He just went home. And it just changed my whole attitude toward his death. I also realized that, you know, my dad would have died at that time, whether I was in Prairie Bible Institute or in the Army. My going into the Army did not cause my dad's death. So he would have died then too. And that would have been a total disaster. Because if I was in the Army and needed it home, I couldn't come home anymore. And if I was in school and at Prairie Bible Institute but needed it home, I couldn't come home because the minute I went home, I'd lose my 4D classification and then I'd be drafted. So I realized it was not a big mistake. And God just healed my heart, and I was able to carry through after that. Sometime after that, the youth group at the church that I was attending, I decided they wanted to do a hayride. So since I had extra time, I said I would organize one. So I went shopping around and found a barn, found a farm that they had wagons, old wagons, wood wagons, horse-drawn wagons, and they had the wagons loaded with hay in their barn. So the guy says, well, yeah, we can give you a hayride, and as long as it doesn't rain while we're doing the hayride, it's good. If it rains that day, the night before, doesn't matter. There's no problem. So, great. So we signed up for it. And come the weekend, come that Sunday evening, when we were supposed to have the hayride, we went to choir practice. But that afternoon, as a matter of fact, more like that morning, it started raining. And it was raining. And it rained until about mid-afternoon, and then it kind of stopped. It was just drizzling. And I went and got Mike Bixler. He said, "So is the hayride still on?" I said, "As long as it doesn't rain while we're while we're on the hayride, yeah, it's still on. The wagons are in a barn." So we went down to get Mike Milligan, another soldier that was attending the church, and he said, "Well, I better get my raincoat." And so I reached into his locker to get his raincoat. And Mike Bixler says, "Where's your faith, man? Where's your faith? We prayed it wouldn't rain." And Mike Milligan said, "I'll show you where my faith is," and he stuck his raincoat back in the closet, and we marched off to the choir practice, and it was dripping. We were kind of dodging. I like to say we were dodging raindrops on the way there. It wasn't pouring rain, but it was, you know how when it just kind of drizzles a little bit. That's what it was doing. But when we got to the church, about 5 minutes after we got inside, it started to just pour. It was just coming down in sheets. That was just a steady flow of water coming down. And everybody said, "Does this mean the hayride's canceled?" I said, "Nope, not as long as it isn't raining while we're on the hayride. It can rain right up until we go to the hayride, and then, but as long as it doesn't rain while we're on the hayride, it's not canceled." So we got done with our choir practice. The rain stopped. Well, I shouldn't slowed down to a drizzle again. It was still dripping when you're driving down you have to use the intermittent windshield wipers. By the time we got to the farm, though, it had stopped. The rain was not coming down at all. It wasn't even drizzling. So we got on the wagons. We went for the hayride, about an hour and a half on the hayride. It came back, and when we got back, we got in the barn, and we got off the hay wagons, and as we're on the way, well, some people were on their way to the cars, some people just got in their cars, the rain started to pour again. And everybody said, "Wow, God answered our prayer. He stopped the rain just long enough for the hayride." Now, Jane, if you remember Jane, she had brought a friend of hers named B. Novobolsky, and I met her during the hayride, and I shared some of my faith with her. I found out she's Catholic, and I was sharing with her how she needed to read the Bible, that the Bible is to the soul what food is to the body. And I said, if you're going to be strong and have strong faith, you need to be reading the Bible at least 2 chapters a day, especially the New Testament. And she goes, "Wow, oh, okay." And we talked about a lot of other stuff. And she gave me her phone number so I could call her, and I gave her mine. Although I didn't have we don't have cell phones back then. I didn't really have a phone number. I'm on base. She could call the company and leave a message, but that no guarantee I'd get it. But anyway, she gave me her phone number. So I called her later, and I made invited her to go roller skating with me. We went roller skating, had a great time, fun time. Went back to her house, got to back to her house, and we're pulled up in the driveway, and we're just talking about various things. And suddenly the porch light flashed on and off. And she said, "That's my dad telling me it's time to come in." I said, "Oh, okay." And then she leaned over and gave me a kiss. And I kissed her back. And that was my first kiss ever. I had never kissed a girl before that. And it just, wow. It's like, what have I been missing? So I was really blown away by it. And she said she had fun. She'd like to do it again. I said, "I'll call you." So away I went back to the barracks, and did that. Shortly after that, I was at the formation, 3 o'clock formation And, oh wait, I already told you that. I'd gotten the dependency discharge papers, and I went back to the base and I filled them out and sent them off to my mom. I also found out from the first sergeant that they were going to need a CQ runner, so I lined up for me to volunteer to be CQ, fill in as CQ. Now CQ runner is the guy that stays up all night and takes messages while for the sergeant that's on duty, runs errands, etc., goes and gets coffee, whatever's needed. But you're on a 16-hour duty, so you get 3-day weekend at the end of it. So I worked it out with another guy so that I worked Monday through Thursday, and then I got Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off, and he worked he worked Friday through he got Sunday, he got Monday off. He worked Tuesday. So anyway, so we by splitting our weekends or our shifting a day, either way, each of us got a 3-day pass. And so that worked out, and we were able to do that for the sergeant. I got the last of the paperwork from my mom on the same day that I got orders for Germany. The same day I got the paperwork in the mail, and then I went to formation and I had the orders for Germany had arrived. Now when I looked at the orders, I had 30 days of leave before I had to report in Germany. So, you know, this would be October, about October 18th. And I had 30 days of leave before I had to go to Germany. So when I took the paperwork into the first sergeant, I asked him, I said, you know, I've got 30 days of leave coming between now and when I have to report in Germany. Can I take that leave while we're processing for a dependency discharge? And he says, Shreve, if you clear base, if you check out on leave, then we can't do anything for you. We'll just have to start, you'll just have to start over when you get to Germany. And I thought, okay, I'm staying. Never mind, I'm not taking leave. So I stayed on base. A couple days later, the first shirt called me in. He said, okay, here's some paper, your dependency discharge request, paperwork. I want you to take it down to headquarters, get it to the commander, and then after he signed it, bring it back. I said, okay. So I went down to headquarters, and of course there's a clerk sits out in front of the commander's office. And he said, what do you want? And I said, I have this paperwork for the commander. He said, put it on my desk and on my inbox. And so I put it on his inbox. And he said, you can go. I will let you know when it's ready. I said, no, I have orders to wait and bring it back to the company when it's done. So I can't leave. I have orders that say I'm supposed to wait. He said, okay, well, have a seat, sit down, make yourself comfortable. It's going to be a long wait. And while I was sitting there waiting, I saw one guy after another, after another, after another come in and put their paperwork on top of mine. Pretty soon the stack was about twice as tall as it was when I put my paperwork on his inbox. And the company commander about then comes out of the office and he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm waiting for paperwork to take back to my company. He said, what paperwork? I said, the form's right there in the middle of that inbox stack. And so he looked through it and found it and said, this is it? And yeah, that's it. So he looked it over and he said, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong. Hands it to the clerk and says, type this up, correct it right away, and bring it into my office. So he corrected it, typed it up real quick, took it into the office. He was in there about maybe 5 minutes or so, maybe 10. And he came back out and he says, here's your paperwork, you can go to your company. So I went back to my company. And when I got there, I told the first sergeant, I said, if I hadn't been sitting there waiting, could have been months, because the guy who's doing his inbox with a, first in, last out. He's working his way down the list, but every time somebody comes in and put another piece of paperwork on it, he starts with the one that's on the top. So it could never get done. And I knew that it was really a wise thing the first shirt did to tell me to wait for that paperwork. So now I had a lot of people. A lot of the soldiers, when they found out I was applying for dependency discharge, they come up to me and they say, Shreve, it's not going to work. The one guy came to me and he said, you know, my dad died, and he said they wouldn't even give me leave until after he was dead. And then they gave me only 30 days. Bob, it's not going to work. You've already had your 30 days. You're not going to get out. It's never going to happen. Just give it up. And a lot of them were saying that. But it turned out it came through and it was approved. When Ronnie Lott found out that I had been approved for the dependency discharge, he came to me and he said, you know, Shreve, you got to be living right. He says, I love it. He says, every time the Army goes to mess with you, God gets in the way. God just steps in the way. He says, I just love it. He says, it's great. And I said, it's not I'm living right. It's I've received Jesus, my Savior, and you can too. He's not like you, man, not like you. And he walked away. And I realized God had answered Sandy's prayer above and beyond. Lot knew the truth. He chose not to believe it, but he knew the truth. He knew that God was real, and he knew that Jesus is real, but he just wouldn't accept it and live by it. I got my dependency discharge. As a matter of fact, on the day, think about the timing of this. On the day that I got alerts for Germany, I found out how to apply. On the day that I got orders for Germany, I filed the final paperwork to apply for the dependency discharge. And on the day that I was supposed to report for duty in Germany, I got a discharge and went home instead. Now only God can do that kind of timing. Only God. Because it had to all start from when I enlisted, right? The date that I enlisted made all that timing work. No human being could make that work out. But God did. So I got my dependency discharge and I returned home. I was so glad to get home. When I got home, now the doctors had figured out that Kenny had epilepsy. So they gave my mom medicine for that, and they said that if we could keep him from forming a habit, a pattern on his seizures, that he would probably outgrow the epilepsy by the time he was 5. That's 3 years away. So when I got home, my mom said, I have never asked for so much help from so many people as I did to fill out that paperwork. I mean, every person that filled out a form had to fill it out, take it down, get it notarized, and bring it back. So, you know, it wasn't like an easy, just fill in the blanks. No, everything had to be carefully documented. She had to get the doctor to document it. She had the pastor document the situation. She had the next door neighbor document the situation. She had to have 3 witnesses or confirmations of her family situation. She had to have a letter from my older brother Jim, stating why he could not fill the slot. She was supposed to have one for my sister, but instead she had the document. She documented that Rosemary, my older sister, was not speaking to us, and we even didn't even really know where she lived at the time. So, you know, she obviously was not a candidate. So there was just so much paperwork my mom had to do, but it worked, and I was able to be home and come home and live there. And so I went to the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. I think it was probably a week or 2 weeks after I got back. I went to the Puget Naval Shipyard where my dad worked. Kimmel, his boss, had called my mom and said, hey, Bob should come down and apply for the electronics apprenticeship here at the shipyard. So I went down, I filled out the paperwork, I applied for the electronics apprenticeship. Herb came by and said, "So, hi Bob, how's it going?" And I said, "Oh, fine." He said, "You filling out the application?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Can I see it?" So he took it and he read through it. He said, "Wait a minute, you've had this, you had that, you had this. Make sure you put this down." And he went through it and he said, make sure I had filled in everything that I had credit for. And kind of corrected my application. And then he said, "Oh, let's do an interview." So we sat down and he interviewed me, and first thing he said, one of the things he said was, "So what's your long-term goal in life?" And I said, "My long-term goal is to be a missionary in Brazil." So, okay. "So what do you think you're going to do here?" I said, "Well, I'll take the electronics apprenticeship, I'll get the training, and I'll work at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard as long as Mom needs me. And then when that's over, I'll look into going to Brazil, finishing my Bible school and going to Brazil." He goes, "Oh, okay. Sounds like you got things planned out." And I left. And when I got home, my mom said, "So, Bob, how'd it go?" And I said, "Fine." I told her how Herb came and corrected my application, and he interviewed me right there on the spot. And she said, "Bob, the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard is not in the business of training missionaries. They train employees to work their life, to work there at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. I sure hope you still get the job after what you said. We really need for you to work. We can't afford for you to not have a job. So I hope you didn't blow it." And I'll tell you how that went next time on the next episode. Thank you.